Today, I'm going to give you 9 web design hacks that I wish I knew as a beginner. And instead of just telling you about them, I'm actually going to show you by taking a design that's just okay and leveling it up to, okay, wait, that's actually sick. Are you ready? Let's go. Okay, so here's what we're working with. It's a hero section that I mocked up, and it's fine, but it doesn't really grab you. And when I first got started, I would have tweaked and poked at this for hours, changing everything that I could possibly imagine to make it better. And honestly, I probably would have still ended up with something that wasn't that much better than what you're looking at right now. But it turns out there are some really simple things that you can do fairly quickly that instantly make a site feel like someone paid a lot of money for it. So let's go through them one at a time. Hack number 1, break up big chunks of text. And chunk is actually a technical term. Nielsen did a study and found that users check out the second they see a big block of copy. And if you look at websites like Apple or even Figma, you'll notice there's never just a massive paragraph sitting on the screen. So the question then becomes, what's the perfect chunk of text size? And what they found is you want to aim for about 50 to 75 characters or about 600 pixels to 700 pixels wide. And you also want to try to add a line break every 2 or 3 sentences to keep things easy to skim. So if you're looking at the design, the first thing that we see is that there's a huge chunk of text right here. And I actually think that we can split this up a little bit. So if we take this last sentence and make it its own chunk, things start to breathe even more. But there's an even better way to break up those big chunks of text, and that's with bullet points. So hack number 2 is that bullet points are a designer's best friend. Why do bullet points work so well in design? Well, it's because our brains love lists, okay? They give the eye a really clear entry point and help users process information quickly without having to do a whole bunch of digging through dense paragraphs. So look at these as an example. Which one are you more drawn to look at? Is it this big chunk of text here or this over here? Which one can you understand fairly quickly without having to do a lot of work? Is it this or is it this? Here's the updated design that we took that big chunk, separated it in 2, and now we're putting it into bullet points. But an even better hack with bullet points, maybe hack 2.1, if you will, is that bullet points with icons is actually fire. They give graphic elements to the text, which can help people organize the content even better. And I should say with this, that this should really frame how you're thinking about building websites. You're not just someone that's taking what the client gives you and then blindly putting it online. No, you're thinking about it critically and figuring out what's best for the user. That's the difference between a $500 website and a $5,000 website. Our next hack is to use a consistent spacing system. Now, you've probably heard this before, or even had clients tell you that they want a really clean website. But what does clean even mean? What it means is that things aren't sized and spaced randomly. There's a method to it, a rhythm that makes the layout easy to navigate and predictable for the user. And to accomplish that, I like to use an 8-point grid system. And all this really means is that elements are spaced by multiples of 8, and they're all spaced evenly. So 8, 16, 24, 32. But here's the key. You want to use a baseline value for most of your grouped elements. And then if you're separating groups from groups, you want to at least double the amount of space between them. And you also want to try to keep the distance between big groups similar. And really, the best way for me to explain this is to show you what we did with the updated design. So here it is with consistent spacing between all of the elements. And you see, like, these are the different groups that I'm working with, right? We've got a group of text right here. We've got another group right here, another group right here. This navigation is a group, and then this image is a group as well. So since this is one group, we use our baseline value to space things out within that group. So that baseline value was 16 pixels. So then if we're gonna double the space between this and the other elements around it, we want this next group to be 32 pixels away, right? So it wasn't just 16, it was 32. And then we kept that similar from our bullet points to our sign up form. So that's another 32 pixels. And then look at the key thing right here. If we're gonna scale back and look at things in a bigger picture, right? Then we've got these big groups that are spaced from these other groups right here, right? So we've got our navigation, our text, and then our image. All of these elements are separated at the same distance, right? So this is 104 pixels right here, and between this group of text with the sign up form and this image, this is 104 pixels as well. This just keeps things really organized and easy for users to navigate. Hack number 4 is you want to use ratios for your line height. And what is line height? Line height is the distance between each line break in a set of text. So it's the gap in between one line of text and the next. And it stays consistent in each group of text or each text element. So what I like to do is for headers, I like there to be a 1-to-1 ratio. And for paragraphs, I like there to be a 1-to-1.5 ratio. Let me show you what I mean a little bit more clearly. So here we have a header that has a font size of 100 pixels. So that means that the line height is also 100 pixels. So that line between this line of text and this line of text is also 100 pixels. But for our paragraphs, we want to increase the size a little bit. This gives our text a chance to breathe a little bit more and makes it easier for folks to engage with. So this text right here is 30 pixels in size. So what should our line height be? Well, if we're using the 1-to-1.5 ratio, that means that we take 30, we multiply it by 1.5, and that gives us a 45 pixel line height. You also see this all over other web designs. So let me show you the Spotify website and just kind of point out how they're doing their line height spacing. So in order to see all of the CSS, there's a few things that we could do. We either could select what we're trying to look at, right click, and then hit inspect. Or if you want to, you can go to View, Developer, and then Inspect Tools or Developer Tools. So that's what I'm gonna do right here. And I'll just come over to the Elements tab. And then if I select this little dotted square with an arrow inside of it, and then kind of scroll over any element, it's going to bring that up on the HTML. So let's select this header right here. And then you can see there's a whole bunch of CSS, and they're actually using variables for their elements with a little bit of calculation. So to kind of skip past all that, if you just select computed instead of styles, it'll give you what those calculations end up being. So you can see here that our font size is 43.1143 and our line height is 43.1143. So on this header, they're also using that 1-to-1 ratio. But if I come down here to something that's a little bit more of a paragraph, you'll see that the font size is 24, but the line height is 30. So that's not quite a 1-to-1.5, but they're also trying to give their paragraphs a little bit of space as well. So every designer does it differently. 1-to-1.5 is just the best starting point that I have found for most designs. Okay, so here's our updated design. The main thing that happened was we added a little bit of space in this subheading copy, and it's already starting to be easier to engage. Hack number 5 is that you also want to refine your text with letter spacing. Now, most fonts don't come perfect right out of the box. And why is that? Well, when a type designer creates a font, they're trying to account for every possible use case. So they set values that look decent across a bunch of different situations. But you as a web designer get to adjust things specifically for your layout. And that's what makes your typography go from default to really dialed in. So here's my general rule. For display fonts, you want to have a negative value for the letter spacing. So anywhere from -1 pixels to maybe -2 or 3. For body text, you want it to be 0 pixels, which is oftentimes the default amount. Then for CTAs, you want there to be a positive distance between each of the letters or the characters. So anywhere from 1 pixel to 2 or 3. Why do I kind of stick to these values? Well, for display fonts, you really want to prioritize scannability, because those are the things that are hopefully going to stop people in their tracks and engage as they scroll down a page. And so if the letters are closer together, they're easier to scan. But for body text, we actually want to make things super legible. So we prioritize legibility. And the type designers are also thinking through legibility as well. So their default values are probably going to be most in line with a user being able to see it and read it really clearly and easily. But for CTAs, we want them to be super clickable. And the way that we do that is adding space between characters so that people slow down to see them. Let's look at the Spotify website to see even more examples of what I'm talking about. So if I select this header up here, you can see that the letter spacing is -0.6 pixels. Now, that's not quite -1, but it's enough to where the words look a little bit more professional. But if I click on some text that we're hoping people read a little bit more clearly, you'll see that there is actually no CSS computed value for letter spacing, which means that it's been left to the default. So here's our updated design, and I'll just go back and forth. This is what it did look like. You can see there's a lot of space between here, and here's where we're at now. It's starting to feel a lot more professional. Okay, hack number 6 is all about font super families. Now, font combos can be a really great way to add some life to a website, but here's the problem. Pairing fonts is actually pretty hard, especially when you're just getting started. If the characters are drastically different in size and spacing, the user's eyes have to bounce all over the place in order to just to read the text and engage with it. So the solution is font superfamilies. Superfamilies are font sets that are designed to work together right out of the box, usually by the same type designer. So the styles feel cohesive no matter what scenario they're being used in. And there's a lot of great paid options out there, but there are even great free ones, especially on Google Fonts. A few of my favorites are the Source font family. So they've got Source Sans, Source Serif, and Source Code. There's the Roboto font family with Sans, Serif, and Slab. And then the one that felt like was the most appropriate for the project that we're working on is the DM family. Not like sliding into DMs, but the DM font, which I'm sure it stands for something. I just don't know what it is. So they've got DM Sans, DM Serif. And I'm actually going to use these two fonts to kind of liven up the design of our hero section. So I took what was the Sans fonts for the header and the Sans fonts for the bullet points, and I added that serif DM option. You can see it all works together cohesively. But after looking at the design for a little bit, you've probably noticed everything's in black and gray. So we need to add a little bit of color. And the hack that makes this super easy is something called CSS overview. So find color palettes with CSS overview. Now, you could, if you wanted to, just create color palettes by going to coolers, hitting the random generator, and pressing spacebar until one shows up that you're really digging. But I like to be a little bit more intentional than that. What I like to do for every single project is have a Figma board that serves as inspiration. So I'm taking screenshots of websites that I feel like are a good fit for the project that I'm working on. I'm pasting them to that board. And then I'm also including a link to the website that I found in order to be able to reference it later on. So some of the inspiration is for typography, some of it is for maybe layout, but always I have a few sources for color palettes. And this SUI Overflow 2025 website had a lot of bright colors that I really liked and felt like would work for what we're working on. So let me take you to that site and show you how to pull up CSS overview. Now, you could, if you wanted to, just take a screenshot of whatever website you're looking at, pull it into either Photoshop or Canva and start color picking. Another option would be to go to developer tools and then just go one by one and inspect all of the items that have the colors that you really like. Now, that's going to take a lot more time than what I'm about to show you. Instead, what you want to do is come over to this 3 dots right here in the upper hand corner of developer tools, scroll over more tools, and see it right here, CSS overview. Then we capture the overview and it lays out everything wonderfully. Not only does it give you the colors, it also gives you the color contrast. It gives you the typography that they're using, the sizing that it has. It's really just a beautiful tool to use as a web designer. But for our example, what I would do at this point is just grab all the colors on the CSS overview that I'm wanting to use and then go to coolers and start adding them to a dashboard. And then from there, once I've got everything that I want, I just click export, save it as an SVG, and then download that to my laptop. I can pull that right into Figma and then use that as my color palette reference. It's such a beautiful thing. So here's our updated design. I didn't go crazy with the colors because the next step that we're gonna take is actually to add some really fun design elements. But here's the hack with this step. You want to be really subtle with your design elements. And why is that? Well, you want content to be the star of the show always. You don't want to distract with all the things that you could be doing with fun animations or some really sick design element that you made in Illustrator or Photoshop. Instead, use things like gradients or soft textured backgrounds or even shadows. In other words, don't over design. Keep it simple and keep the main thing the main thing. The first thing that we did to our design was we added a little bit of a drop shadow to this image because it was kind of blending in a little bit too much with the background, and I wanted to make sure that it really stood out to users. Now from here, instead of just randomly throwing different things on there, what I do is I go back to my inspiration board and try to find some things that might work in my scenario. So something that was really cool that I found was the way that these guys did this email input field, and they rounded all of their buttons as well. I thought that was really cool. I thought it really fit the style that I was going for. And so I added that to my input field and to the sign up button in the right-hand corner. So then from there, I started looking at different textures. I like all of my designs to have a little bit of texture. I just don't like it when there's just a base color as a background for every single section. Now it's okay if it's in there intermittently, but I like it to feel like whatever the content is actually sitting on top of something. It's not just floating. If you look at this design, there's a subtle little texture of dots. And if I scroll in a little bit, it kind of becomes a little bit more pronounced. And so that's what I did. I added some dotted textures to the background of the section, but that creates a problem. We're starting to compete with our content here, specifically with the text that is the subheading underneath this big header. We don't want users to have to really focus their eyes in order to read this stuff. So if you go back and look, you'll notice there's actually a pretty subtle gradient around the text in our inspiration example. So that's exactly what I did. I came through, I added a gradient that is a radial that just kind of sits behind the text to keep those dots from competing with what we want people to really be engaging with. So here's a little bit of a close-up, and you can see it's already starting to feel better. And the next thing that I did was I came through and I added some more color, but I didn't make it really loud. I just added some nice purple gradients to the corners here and an orange gradient to the corner here. And instantly, this is already looking way better than what we started with, but we're not done yet. We want to make sure that all of the elements on the page are standing out how we want them to, that the visual hierarchy is really working in our favor. And the last and final hack to really make sure that's happening is something called the Squint test. The Squint test is something they teach you in design school. And I've never been to a design school, but this is something my friends who have told me. And it's actually super easy to use, even if you've never taken a design class. So here's how it works. You step back from your design, which is always a good thing, especially when you've been looking at something for hours. And you just kind of squint your eyes until it becomes a little bit blurry. And then you ask yourself, what stands out as I'm looking at it squinted? Because if your headlines or your call to action don't jump out from that squint test, then your page kind of just turns into a blob. And that's how you know that something's off. Now, I can't force you to do a squint test on the design we've been working on, but what I can do is take that image or take that hero section and then add a little bit of a blur to it. And you can see that things are really working fairly well for us, right? Like you see some nice visual hierarchy, especially with our headline, which is what we want to do. We want to prioritize that. We're kind of seeing that with these buttons, which is great. But something that is getting just a little bit lost is this form field. And we want to make sure that even though a user is going to be able to look at this button and know, okay, this is my call to action, we don't want them to question, okay, but what do I do with that call to action? We want them to see, hey, you actually fill out this form. And one of the ways that we can do that is just by adding a nice little background to this input field. So if I do that, you can see it instantly starts to pop out on the page even more. If I redo the squint test, you can see it commands a little bit more visual importance for us. And this is looking really, really nice. So let's go back. Here's what we started with, and here's where we ended up. Now, these design hacks might not seem life-altering, but they can make a huge difference in how professional your websites look as you're building things for yourself or for clients. Hey, if you like these hacks, you're gonna love my other video with 50 different design tips and tricks to level up your web design skills. It is packed and you're gonna wanna check it out. And if you want the Figma file that we worked on in this video, I've got you covered. You can grab that totally free in the description below. Hey, I hope this was helpful. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget, if you don't quit, you win.